what's going on, everyone? This is Peter coming at you through the tubes of the internet. Today, taking a look at the latest release from Spanish Love Songs, an album called Brave Faces, everyone. I'm excited to discuss and glad you could join.
Fast facts.
Brave Faces, everyone, released February 7th, 2020 via Pure Noise Records, is the third studio LP from LA-based punk act Spanish Love Songs. The group currently consists of 5 members: frontman Dylan Slocum, guitarist Kyle McCauley, bassist Trevor Dietrich, keyboardist Meredith Van Wert, and drummer Ruben Duarte.
Backstory.
Spanish Love Songs have spent the past 5 years making oppressively gloomy punk tunes about love, loss, and the anxieties that come along with adulting. Their sound blends elements of emo and pop punk and draws super heavily on contemporaries from those genres. And while their 2018 breakout Schmaltz almost seems more like a work of Menzinger's fan fiction, it's still incredibly well executed with explosive instrumentals and witty, engaging lyricism. The band's latest offering, Brave Faces, everyone, continues these trends as the crew serve up another batch of hard-hitting punk and gut-wrenching emotion. LP3 finds Spanish Love Songs still struggling to develop their own voice, but also mostly using genre conventions effectively enough to deliver enjoyable tunes. The production on this release is somewhat one-note, with basic guitar tones dominating the mix across the board, but Slocum's impassioned vocal performances do a lot to keep the album engaging, and the band are able to get most of these tunes to work by sheer brute force.
Track-by-track analysis.
This release has 10 tracks and clocks in at 40 minutes. With an average track length of 4 minutes, tunes often feel too bulky. The instrumentals are hard-hitting, but the lack of distinction in the musical approaches from song to song creates a murky flow to the record. The album tries to compensate by adding dynamic intensity changes to most tunes, but even those can lose punch due to being too drawn out. This runtime is a detriment because the overall sameness in the music and lyrics leaves the record treading water a lot.
Track 1, Routine Pain.
On any given day, I'm a 6 of 10.
As the title suggests, this tune's about being caught in a loop of the mundane, and it finds Slocum wanting to drink away his boredom and insecurities. Verses mention the lack of fulfillment he's finding via art and relationships, stating that no one cares about his music or the general anger he's harboring.
It don't matter, they don't want to hear me on the other side.
A thick layer of malaise hangs over the tune as driving guitars and drums build in intensity throughout the cut until completely dropping out for an epic breakdown. To close the tune, Spanish Love Songs layer on instrumentals one by one until the soundscape's completely maxed out, and then hold this intensity level for a solid minute. The repetition in the lyrics mirrors the track's theme one-to-one, but this creates a weird situation, because in a vacuum, I think this song's perfectly executed, but in the context of the full record, it's almost reduced to nothing particularly special. The constant use of blasting, overdriven instrumentation and structural elements like a cappella breakdowns make it seem like the band has just copy-pasted the musical arrangement down on several different tracks. And the conscious way this cut appears to play with that repetition starts to feel less and less intentional as the album progresses. I still feel like this is a strong opener, but after hearing this musical composition 6 or 8 times on the record, it loses some luster.
I'm not alright.
Track 2, Self-Destruction, as a sensible career choice.
Just kidding, God forbid.
All I hear is patience. All I haven't missed bank payments.
On track 2, Dylan laments that his dreams aren't taking shape as he'd planned, and the economic hole this puts him in grows his doubts about the future. The chorus lines here offer a positive outlook and then just as quickly shoot it down.
It won't be this bleak forever. Yeah, right.
Stating that even if one problem's resolved, there's plenty of others already queued up to take its place, with both personal gripes and the existential problems of the world in line to wreck his life. At just 3 minutes, this cut has a breezier pace than most, and twinkly emo leads brighten up the gloom. I think the production could have done more with the call and response nature of the chorus, but that'll likely come to fruition in a live setting. This is an alright tune overall.
Track 3, Generation Loss.
This is the record's first song that takes a strong narrative approach, with Slocum telling the story of a friend falling into depression and eventually committing suicide. Economic hardships pile on top of struggles with addiction until succumbing to these misfortunes becomes the only path forward. Instrumentals here seem fairly generic, with a butt rock quality to the chugging chorus guitars, and lyrics feel rehashed from the band's previous material. But my main issues are with the way the theme's presented. Obviously this album's a work of fiction, but it seems like the song wants to make a statement about trusting people when they say they're depressed, and I'm not sure how that jives with the lyrical content of the record. Almost every line on this release is gloomy as fuck, and several are outright suicidal. It makes the album either seem like a cry for help, or the topic of the song seem completely glib and cynical towards mental illness. That general feeling of glamorizing depression looms over a lot of the record, and this track is the worst offender. Bad vibes here, this one's getting a yikes from me, the album's worst song.
Track 4, Kick.
When you saw your dad shoot up for the first time, it must have came as quite a shock.
This tune shares a similar theme with the previous tracks, but adds several layers of complexity in the songwriting that take it to another level. Slocum uses starkly contrasting imagery to show the damned if you do, damned if you don't aspect of the theme, and the intricate wordplay here really demonstrates his songwriting chops. Staying positive contrasted against laying low, arms outstretched in worship contrasted against arms outstretched to shoot up drugs, the hero who rises from the couch versus the villain who dies there. All these opposites highlighted in the lyricism drive the point home that the world's gonna kick you regardless of which option you choose. Musically, this tune's pretty standard pop-punk fare, but the cascading drums following the acoustic breakdown add a really urgent quality to the instrumentation, and the soaring guitar leads cut through the mix to give an anthemic quality. All the singles on this release are standout tracks, and this one's no exception. Great tune.
Track 5, Beachfront Property.
Said it's the end of days, and we're just hoping for the beachfront property.
Throughout the release, Spanish love songs have been toying with a Midwest emo sound, and this is the track where they commit most fully to that approach. Drum and bass tones guide the instrumental through the verses before the full band jump into the mix for the explosive choruses. Lyrics reprise a theme from the band's tune El Nino considers his failures, where Slocum yearns for a place he can truly call home and lay down roots. But on this cut, he's given up on the idea of finding fulfillment in this location and has resigned himself to thinking every city's equally shitty. This same nihilistic attitude extends to the general concept of doing any good in the world, with the track ending on the idea of I'm too worn down to care. And it just feels like a pretty lame sentiment. The album always goes super on the nose with the descriptions of depression and sadness, but it can't muster that same clarity to make a statement about political issues. The titular line seems to allude to rampant consumerism in the face of climate catastrophe, and there's a line hinting at the need for gun control, but the end outcome is just, it is what it is. I get that these broader issues play into the overall misery felt by the characters on this release, but it'd be nice if the record could ever offer a take other than this sucks. Pretty boring tune, just another slight variation on the theme of hopelessness.
Track 6, Losers.
Well, we're gonna waste the days getting outpriced of our apartment.
The album's first single was originally released 9 months before the record as a whole, and the theme here really set the tone for what was to come with the full release. As a standalone track, I was absolutely over the moon for this tune. It felt like the band taking their songwriting to the bleakest possible depths, abandoning all levity, and directly making a case for suicide. The tune finds Slocum in financial peril, and the most obvious cost-cutting method available to him is simply death. Everything's only ever going to get harder, so checking out early seems like a desirable alternative. Taken individually, this tune's a rockin' descent into the abyss, but this full release just has a way of flattening anything good that individual songs accomplish. With 8-ish tracks at this same level of jet black, the theme seems so played out by this point that I'm pretty numb to it. Musically, this tune's pretty standard pop-punk fare, but the cascading drums following the acoustic breakdown add a really urgent quality to the instrumentation and whatever else. The track's still good overall, it's just completely crushed under the weight of endless repetition of the theme.
Track 7, Optimism, as a radical life choice.
Pain is back in my chest again, holding me down like a high school friend.
Spanish love songs borrow the intro from Incubus's Drive to give the first few seconds of this song a 90s alternative feel. But from then on, the tune shifts into a Wonder Years setup and just falls back into old patterns. This is one of the chiller songs on the record as Dylan contemplates the question, what would it take to be happy? Wondering what life would be like if he wasn't constantly bone broke, if the threat of a mass shooter wasn't looming, or if he wasn't constantly running away from problems and could actually settle down in one locale. I don't see anything particularly optimistic in the lyricism here other than the general sense of, I don't want to die. And though that's a pretty low bar, I guess in the context of this record it fits the bill. In the 11th hour, as the oceans are rising and Armageddon's bearing down, Slocum decides he doesn't want to be outright executed Old Yeller style. Pretty inspiring stuff. I like that Slocum resists the urge to go full-on goat mode for the solo vocal on the breakdown here. Hearing him sing without the over-the-top warbling affectation to his voice is a cool touch, but otherwise a pretty forgettable cut. The line about pointing out dead dogs in the road just seems weird in an off-putting way. What the fuck?
Track 8, Losers Part 2, Still Loserin'.
A grimy bass line starts this tune, and although the vocal melody takes a few lines to find its footing riding this beat, by the time the cut reaches its first chorus, it's perfectly locked in and the singing explodes out of the mix. Thematically, this track suggests that all the hardships recounted throughout the release were fated to happen, because depression and a lack of fulfillment are these characters' destiny for being poor. Of all the myriad breakdowns on this release, this is probably my favorite, because for the first time in a half hour, the keyboards are used in a meaningful way with a distinctive synth tone. And the lyricism perfectly articulates the concept of downward mobility. Slocum has hit a brick wall in terms of opportunity, and there's an entire infrastructure in place to make sure he stays there.
Gotta find a place of my own, where the fuck-ups aren't cops.
This is definitely the track that allows the band's full range of instrumentation to shine through most, and show Spanish love songs' potential for crafting really compelling tunes by utilizing the depth of their roster. Very cool cut, great lyrics, probably my favorite on the release.
Track 9, Dolores.
The radio's droning, told out by the intercom on fire.
Hospital waiting room imagery is used on this cut, and Slocum's able to dial into the sights and sounds to present a really visceral recreation of this setting. Cries from patients blend with wailing sirens, blood-stained shoes and flickering TV screens join ice-cold hands to create a full range of sensory descriptors for this location, and it really places the listener in the world of the story. Dylan's vocal is at its all-time shakiest, but it seems appropriate for the tone of the track, with the aura of dread the lyrics create leaving him on the brink of tears. Rather than following the bog standard verse, chorus, bridge, chorus setup of the rest of the album, this tune is a raw and stripped down stream of consciousness that subtly builds in intensity throughout, and the huge ending here seems well earned. The meaninglessness of thoughts and prayers really comes through in the build-up of the track, and although I wish the band would have gone even further with the choral sound to close out, it's still a well-executed song due to the atmosphere it creates.
They're praying for you!
Track 10, Brave Faces, Everyone.
Broken nose, another textured ceiling. I know where I am, up until I come lost.
This tune begins with an interesting story beat, as the outcome Dylan swore up and down throughout the release would never happen, happens. Slocum's in denial about where he's ended up, but it's revealed to the listener that he's back living at his parents' house. The humor of the band's earlier material makes a comeback to close the record in the form of that ironic outcome and Dylan's continued insistence that deep down he's an optimist, stating as such in the lyrics and then launching directly into a gruesome description of self-immolation, burning to bone, crumbling to dust, and blowing away in the wind.
Swear to God, I'm an optimist.
Musically, the band still has one last trick up their sleeve, and fittingly it involves the group just cramming on their instruments. The full band sync up to jam out a choppy rhythm, and it packs a huge percussive punch. The bridge runs through a medley of lines from previous tracks, and although everything's mixed way too low for my taste, it still has an epic feel. The last lines here are among the release's most sincere sounding to my ear, and this is a really great closer.
Broken, life's just very long. Brave faces, everyone.
Verdict.
Overall, I thought this release was pretty good, but I also found it disappointing. This was one of my most anticipated albums of the year, but it turned out to be a step back for the band, both lyrically and compositionally. The playful, witty songwriting of Schmaltz was abandoned to make way for a monolith of woe, and the vocal melodies here are a snooze by comparison. I tried spending some extra time with this release, hoping it would grow on me. This is my favorite genre, and epic over-the-top breakdowns are my favorite aspects of the genre, and being crushed by capitalism is a theme almost guaranteed to appeal to my sensibilities, but the record just doesn't do it for me as a whole. It's undeniable that individual tracks here rip, but I've never heard an album where the songs work against each other so actively when taken as a complete package. For that reason, I'm going to give this release a score of 7.5 out of 10.
Cost of living means the cost to stay alive. Well, don't you know you were born in time, poor man? Don't you know that you're gonna do yourself in?
So that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on the record. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the release, my critique, or the review format in general. Making this is a lot of work, but also fun, and definitely worth it if it helps some people wrap their head around the record. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.
Vote for Daddy Bernie, bitch.